Live now. Final trial ends Menglong case. Shocking verdict for the suspects. For months, the world has held its breath, following every twist in the heartbreaking and horrifying case of Menglong. From leaked videos to shocking contracts, from hidden files to betrayals by people he trusted most, every revelation has sent shockwaves across the globe. And now it has all come down to this moment, the final trial. The courtroom was overflowing with reporters, grieving fans, and even international observers. The air was so thick with tension that even the smallest whisper felt like thunder. This wasn't just another legal proceeding, it was the endgame of a case that had shattered millions of hearts and exposed the darkest underbelly of the entertainment industry. The courtroom atmosphere. From the moment the suspects were escorted into the chamber, the atmosphere grew electric. Among them were the once beloved actors, the shady manager, and the accomplices whose names had filled countless headlines. Their faces were pale, drained of color, as if they too felt the weight of the moment. On the other side of the room sat Yumenglong's mother, her eyes red from months of tears, but blazing with unyielding strength. She clutched a framed photo of her son, refusing to look away from the accused. Every time her gaze landed on them, silence gripped the room. The presiding judge, known for his no-nonsense demeanor, took his seat. Cameras clicked. The world was watching live. The evidence that changed everything. The trial began with a chilling replay of the CCTV footage that had recently surfaced, footage showing the sequence of events leading up to Menglong's final hours. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the screens displayed every horrifying detail. The threats, the abuse, the way he was cornered by people who once pretended to be his closest allies. But then came the evidence that truly froze the room. A USB drive recovered from Menglong's belongings. On it were files that included voice notes, personal diary entries, and hidden recordings. In one note, his trembling voice whispered, "If they silence me, let this be heard, they are not who they say they are." The room erupted into cries and shouts. Even the suspects shifted uneasily, some covering their faces with their hands. This wasn't just evidence. This was Menglong himself, speaking from beyond, testifying in the only way he could. The shocking testimonies. One by one, witnesses took the stand. First was a young production assistant who had worked on Menglong's final project. With tears streaming down his cheeks, he revealed how the actor had confided about being pressured, manipulated, and trapped by ironclad contracts. Then came Song Erin, the actress who had previously been accused of involvement. Her testimony was one of the most shocking yet. Fighting back sobs, she admitted that she too had been threatened into silence. "They used me to control him," she confessed. "But I couldn't stop what happened. I carry that guilt forever." Her words shook the courtroom, revealing layers of deception and coercion that painted an even darker picture of the industry machine surrounding Menglong. But the most heart-wrenching testimony came from his mother. Standing tall, her voice trembling but firm, she pointed directly at the accused and said, "You thought you could take his life, erase his truth, and silence his dreams. But you failed. Today, the world hears him louder than ever." The entire courtroom fell into stunned silence. Even the judge lowered his gaze, visibly shaken. The suspects' final confessions. As the trial neared its climax, the judge gave the suspects one last chance to speak. What followed was a spectacle no one expected. The first actor broke down completely, his words spilling out between sobs. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he cried. "We were told to scare him, not to end him." Another suspect, trembling, admitted that he had been bribed and manipulated by higher powers. "We were pawns. Do you understand? We were pawns in something bigger. If we refused, we would be destroyed too." But the most chilling confession came from Menglong's former manager, the man fans had long suspected. He raised his head slowly, his voice cold and unrepentant. He was getting too powerful, too dangerous. He was going to expose everything. Someone had to stop him. And I was chosen to do it. The courtroom erupted in outrage. Shouts filled the air. Yumenglong's mother collapsed into tears, comforted by family and supporters. The judge slammed his gavel, demanding silence. But the damage was done. The entire world had just heard the horrifying motive straight from the perpetrator's lips. The verdict that shook society. After hours of deliberation, the court returned with its verdict. The world leaned in. Every camera, every reporter, every grieving fan watching live held their breath. The judge's words echoed like thunder. The manager was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, his crimes deemed deliberate, cruel, and irredeemable. The actors involved received long prison sentences, ranging from 20 to 35 years, their fame stripped and their reputations destroyed. The accomplices, though claiming coercion, were also handed heavy penalties, with the court declaring, "Fear does not absolve guilt." As the sentences were read, gasps, sobs, and cries filled the courtroom. Some fans cheered for justice. Others wept for the tragedy that no sentence could ever undo. Yumenglong's mother, though broken, raised her son's photo high, whispering through her tears, "You won, my son. They couldn't bury your truth." The aftermath. Outside the courthouse, thousands of fans gathered, holding candles and chanting Menglong's name. The verdict had brought justice, but it also reignited anger toward the powerful figures who had not yet been named or punished. International media exploded with coverage. Headlines blared across every platform. "Justice for Menglong. Final trial ends in historic verdict." Entertainment industry in shock as sentences announced. Fans demand investigation into higher powers behind the case. Though the suspects had been sentenced, everyone knew this was not the end. The trial had closed one chapter, but it had also opened countless new questions. Menglong's legacy. Even in death, Yumenglong's voice roared louder than ever. His unfinished projects, his hidden notes, his bravery in the face of betrayal, all of it now formed a legacy of resistance and truth. The final trial wasn't just about punishing his killers. It was about shining a light on the system that enabled them. And though the verdict had been delivered, the silence of those higher-ups still loomed like a storm cloud. Closing. The final trial of Yumenglong's case may have ended, but the echoes of its shocking revelations will haunt society for years. Fans, family, and even strangers united under a single truth: his voice could never truly be silenced. As the cameras faded, the image that lingered was unforgettable. Yumenglong's mother clutching his photo, tears streaming down her face, whispering a promise that resonated far beyond the courtroom. This is not the end. This is only the beginning of the truth. And with that, the story of Menglong continues to burn like a flame that refuses to be extinguished. The day of the final trial did not begin like an ordinary morning. It began like the prologue to history itself. The courthouse was surrounded by a sea of fans, banners waving, candles burning, and chants of "Justice for Menglong" rising like thunder. Some wore his face on their shirts, others carried flowers, and many clutched phones, live streaming every second for the millions who couldn't be there in person. Inside, the tension was suffocating. The courtroom walls seemed to close in with every tick of the clock. Reporters from across the globe huddled in corners, whispering frantic notes into microphones, their voices drowned by the hum of anticipation. Then the suspects entered. The suspects' entrance. The doors creaked open and armed officers guided them in one by one. Their faces were pale, some trembling, some trying to look defiant but failing under the sheer weight of the eyes upon them. The once glamorous actors who had graced red carpets now shuffled in like shadows of themselves. The audience reacted instantly. Gasps rippled through the air, some fans burst into tears, others shouted accusations. But the most piercing silence came from Yumenglong's mother, seated in the front row. She clutched a photo frame of her son to her chest, her lips pressed so tight they trembled. She didn't shout, she didn't move. Her stillness was sharper than any scream. The manager, the man most suspected of orchestrating everything, walked in last. His expression was unreadable, a mix of arrogance and fear, as if he still held cards no one had yet seen. The evidence is played. The prosecution wasted no time. They dimmed the lights, and onto a massive screen, the CCTV footage flickered to life. It showed Menglong in his final hours. The courtroom fell into a chilling silence as the world watched him pacing, clutching his phone, whispering words no one could hear. Then came the shadows, figures approaching, their movements sharp and deliberate. A cry pierced the room as someone recognized one of the suspects on the footage. The suspects themselves shifted in their seats, visibly shaken as the evidence confirmed what they had tried to deny. Then the video cut abruptly, leaving only static. But the silence that followed was louder than the footage itself. Next came the USB drive recovered from Menglong's belongings. Inside were his diary entries, hidden recordings, and voice notes. The courtroom trembled when his voice filled the speakers. "If they silence me, let this be heard. They think I am weak, but I am not afraid. If this reaches you, remember, they are not who they say they are." People wept openly. Some collapsed in grief. Others screamed in anger. Even the judge had to pause, visibly moved by the haunting words of a young man who knew his end was near. The mother's unbreakable stare. Through it all, Yumenglong's mother never looked away from the suspects. Her eyes, red and swollen, were locked on them with a mixture of sorrow and fire. It was as though she was speaking directly into their souls without ever opening her mouth. At one point, when the recording finished, she raised the framed photo of her son for everyone to see. Her voice cracked as she whispered, but the whole courtroom heard. "This is my son. This is who you tried to erase. Look at him. Look at what you did." The weight of her words crushed the air. Even the suspects turned their faces away, unable to endure the gaze of a grieving mother who refused to let them hide. Whispers of higher powers. But the trial wasn't just about the faces in that room. Beneath every word lingered the question, who else was involved? The prosecution hinted at bigger players, contracts signed under coercion, hidden investors, shadowy figures who profited from Menglong's silence. A hushed wave of speculation swept through the spectators. Some whispered names of industry titans, others shook their heads in disbelief. It was becoming clear that while these suspects were on trial, the rot stretched far deeper than anyone wanted to admit. The courtroom chaos. As the final witnesses spoke, chaos erupted. One of the younger actors, pale and trembling, suddenly shouted from his seat. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way. We were told just to scare him, just to keep him quiet." The room exploded in gasps. The judge pounded his gavel, but the damage was done. The confession was live-streamed worldwide. Another suspect broke down in tears, clutching at his chest, crying out that they had been threatened by powerful men who were still free. But the manager, stone-faced, unblinking, sat silently, his lips curled in the faintest smirk. It was as if he knew something no one else did, a final card hidden under the table. Fans outside react. Outside the courthouse, the crowd surged as updates spilled out through live feeds. Screams, tears, and chants filled the air. People hugged strangers, sobbing into each other's arms. One fan held up a handwritten sign that read, "Menglong's truth lives forever." Another shouted into a camera, "Even if they jail them all, the bigger monsters must pay." The courthouse steps became a sea of grief and rage, candles glowing like stars under the afternoon sun. The build-up to the verdict. As the evidence ended, the judge announced a recess before the final verdict. The suspects were escorted out under heavy guard. The crowd inside buzzed like a hive on fire. Reporters rushed to file breaking updates, their voices trembling with adrenaline. Lawyers whispered frantically with their clients, some suspects begging for mercy, others staring into nothingness as if their fate was already sealed. And there, in the front row, Menglong's mother leaned back, clutching her son's photo, whispering a prayer only she could hear. When the judge returned, the courtroom fell into silence, so heavy it felt like the world had stopped spinning. The stage was set. The world leaned forward, waiting to hear the words that would define history, the final verdict in the Menglong case. And though the gavel had not yet fallen, everyone in that room knew this was no longer just about justice. This was about exposing the darkest truth the industry had ever tried to bury.